Well, welcome to the Aging Boomers. I'm your host, Frank Sampson, and of course on our show we discuss so many of the issues facing boomers, their parents, and what we know, of course, is an aging population. And wanted to also mention that today's show, of course, is sponsored by Senior Care Authority, a professional senior placement and elder care management organization that has a national network of advisors to help in determining the right path for seniors in receiving proper care or even supervision. So whether it's in-home care, assisted living, residential, or memory care, get the necessary advice from a senior care advisor in your area by calling Senior Care Authority at 888-809-1231, or you can just go to seniorcareauthority.com, and a lot of great information and articles, and of course our podcast is on there as well. So as I always am, I'm always excited about our guests. But I wanted to first thank everybody for all their support. So many of you have gone onto iTunes, iHeartRadio, on our website. Now we're on Boomian. Many of you have gone to Boomian to listen or downloaded our free app. So if you have an iPhone or Android phone, of course, you can just go onto your apps, do a search for Aging Boomers, will come up. And you'll be able to then listen to the shows regularly. They'll advise you when a show comes out, which we do each Monday and Friday. So I'd like to interview today's guest, Pamela Spahr. I should have asked you. Spahr, is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes, it is. That's okay. Perfect.
All right, great. So Pamela Spahr, she is the creator of the Caregiver's Survival Toolkit. It's an ebook, and Pamela is a leading expert in behavioral techniques designed especially for caregivers to effectively manage patients with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. She is also a nationally recognized speaker. Pamela conducts workshops and advanced training for caregivers, both family and professional, and healthcare workers in effectively communicating with and managing elderly and those with dementia. So, Pamela, thank you so much for joining us on the Aging Boomers. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I know you're fighting a little cold, but I think we're going to work through it.
I think we will.
Okay, great. So I always like to ask people initially, those that are authors, have written books, there's always an inspiration behind that. What was that inspiration for you to write your book?
Frank, several years ago, my husband suffered several strokes, and as a result, he was diagnosed with dementia. When he came home from the hospital, he didn't come with an instruction guide. Yeah. I think the hospital forgot that. But it took me months to figure out how to manage my husband on a daily basis because, of course, his behaviors were entirely different now that he had the dementia. What I did was, after several months of trying to figure out how to work with him, I remembered that years before I had learned how to effectively communicate with people using behavioral techniques. And I thought, well, I wonder if that would help me manage my husband. Mm-hmm. Well, Frank, those techniques turned out to be my lifesavers. They became my survival toolkit. And I just knew, Frank, that if I had all those problems trying to figure out how to manage my husband, there were other caregivers out there who had the same problems. So what I did is I wrote my book.
That's tremendous. That's great. And I'm sure you've helped many others with this. So it's fortunate you had that background. I would think that when when it was discovered that your husband was diagnosed, that you probably did a lot of reading or of books and things of others that have written, so probably gave you the opportunity to see what was out there. I mean, there are a lot of different books out there, and usually written by people who are going through, this process, with a loved one. So, tell our people how you think the book, Caregiver Survival Toolkit. I keep saying Toolkit differs from many of the books out there on caregiving.
Well, Frank, one of the things that I have actually seen, and in many circumstances I have talked to other caregivers and other professionals, what I found is that there's a lot of medical information out there or a lot of physical information out there. And by that I mean, how do I move one person from a chair to whatever? How do I give somebody medicine? How would I get my husband out of bed? But that wasn't the information that I was looking for. What I was looking for was information on how to manage him on a daily basis. And when he got agitated, how do I calm him down and get him refocused? If he was having a bad day and he was agitated or wandering around a lot, how could I help him be more comfortable? How could I get him to a safe situation if he was unsafe and still maintain a high degree of respect, because it's so important to me.
Yeah,
So what I found out there was the medical information, but not the behavioral information, Frank, and that's what I write about.
That's so important. I mean, as you know, I'm in the business, and I deal with a lot of family members, whether they be adult children or spouses of a loved one that has dementia. Sometimes those personalities change. It's pretty common, and they may be behaving in a way that you've never seen before. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In the initial stages of something like Alzheimer's, the changes aren't that large. But as the disease progresses, what I tell family caregivers is the disease begins to talk. It's not the person. It is the disease that takes over. So if a person is not the same as they were, it's not that they know what's happening. Mm-hmm. It's just that the disease is taking over their brain and managing who they are.
I mean, I really commend you, for doing what you do. Not just the book. I'm talking just taking care of your husband. But not everybody's cut out for that. Do you agree? Or do you think that more people with guidance like you're giving could do it when maybe they think they can't?
That's what I'm trying to teach. I'm trying to help people who were in the same position I was when I started out. I was in so much overwhelm, Frank, for months, because it was hard for me to understand how to handle him in an agitated state, or if he was unfocused, or if he was in an unsafe situation, or if he wandered. And I know that there are people out there whose loved one has just come home, and they're facing a person who is entirely different. And what do? I want to show them that life doesn't have to stop now, that it doesn't have to be difficult and overwhelming. I want to give them this toolkit of maybe as many as 10 different techniques that they can use on an everyday basis that aren't difficult to use, and they are very respectful.
Right. Well, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about how people can get your Caregiver's Survival Toolkit. I got it right that time. But do you mind just maybe discussing a couple of them? Some of the techniques that you've used, some examples?
I would be more than happy to. one of the things that caregivers, especially new caregivers, have to understand is that people with dementia and Alzheimer's are very, very susceptible to the state of their caregiver's behavior or mind. So if a person approaches a loved one who has dementia and that person or caregiver is agitated, it will only make the patient more agitated.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things I teach is we do a technique called low, slow, and in the flow. It just means you approach somebody slowly, you talk softly and slowly, and that you try to get them to move in your pace, which is now very calm. By showing them that calmness, you give them permission to be calm.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other techniques that I use is observing your loved one. Now, I don't mean, looking at how they physically look. What I mean is, are they moving slowly? If they're moving slowly, they may be calm. Are they moving fast? And they may be agitated. If a loved one is agitated, using different techniques to calm them down are required. If they're calm, then if the caregiver is calm, then both of them will be working in unison together, and it's a much better state to be in to elicit cooperation.
So, raising your voice or talking to them like a child or something, that's certainly not going to help the situation, correct?
I have the funniest story to tell you, Frank.
I'd love to hear it.
When I brought my husband home, I thought, well, I would use my everyday tone, and I was a high-tech executive, so I tended to put a lot of authority in my voice. And so I had every day planned. I knew when he was going to get up and when he was going to go to bed and what we were going to do during the day. And then I would talk to him in this very authoritative voice. And one day he looked right at me and he said, "Pam, don't talk to me that way. I'm not a child." So I learned in a hurry that I had to change my whole strategy, and that authoritative voice wasn't going to fly.
That's great advice. So the Caregiver's Survival Toolkit, I certainly don't want to be rushing it at the end of our interview. So why don't you go ahead and tell people how they could get it. I'm sure they go to Amazon, but I'm sure there's other ways to get it. And then I have then if you could, tell us kind of what they should expect if they were to pick it up as an ebook. How does it differ from? Is it reading? Does it incorporate illustration? So I'll let you talk about that a little bit.
Okay. The best way for people to pick up my book is through Amazon.
Okay.
Right now it is only an ebook on Amazon. But what I'm doing is I'm actually beginning to work with publisher to create a print book. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking forward to that. Sometime in the first quarter of 2015, I should have a printed version of it.
Great.
What I did in my book was I divided it into two pieces. The first piece is my experiences when I brought my husband home from the hospital. And it includes things like what kinds of challenges did I run into when I first brought him home. And it's not caring. It's all about all of the legal and financial issues that I ran into and issues dealing with Social Security and Medicare. The second half of the book, I talk about my techniques, and I actually lay out tables of techniques that I use so that people know what situations to use it in, what movements or what they should say, and then what the response is that they should be looking for in their loved ones. That's kind of a capsule of the book.
That's great. That's great. So I look forward. That's great that you're going to have it in a print version. We'll have to have you back when that happens. We look forward to that. So I have a question. So you're obviously have studied this, practice it, and I have no doubt handle your husband's situation in a certain way, and it works. What do you do when maybe other family members come to visit, friends come to visit, and they don't know that your technique? Could that throw things off if they handle things in a more of a, I don't know, not as far as in a calming way as you've referred to it?
I'm a very forgiving caregiver. I take my husband everywhere. I take him out to dinner every once in a while. I take him out to breakfast. I take him to events. I take him to some business events. What I do is I have a very helpful technique that I use when I take him out. I have a little business card, Frank, that says on it, "The person with me has dementia. Your patience is appreciated." And I will give that to a server or a clerk, or if a person approaches Bob, I'll give it to them. And what it does is it keeps the respect for my husband, but it also lets other people know that he has dementia, and he may say odd things, he may ask them odd questions, he may, touch them when they don't expect it, on the, maybe on the arm or on the shoulder or something. Now they feel much more comfortable that they know what the situation is.
That's a great point. That's great. It's interesting you mentioned that, because I interviewed a lady. She's just a wonderful woman, and she has Alzheimer's. All right, and she carries around a card. She gives out a card that says something like what you were talking about with your husband, but she hands it out to people.
What a wonderful idea. I hadn't thought about having him hand it out.
Well, I mean, what she realized her, what was happening at the beginning, and though it was very upsetting, she knew that at some point, as the disease progressed, that she may start to act differently. So she knew that early on and had business cards made up with some explanation on it. So it's quite interesting, and I think that's a great idea. So I don't know how far along your husband is, but with other family caregivers, at what point, I mean, do they just, you think most people, after looking at your, reading your survival toolkit, should be able to kind of handle things for as long as the person is with us, or at some point do they need to say, I'm not sure I could do this anymore? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, or is it just? I'm sure it depends on the person themselves, but any thoughts on that?
It really does depend on the person, Frank, very much on the person. But because this is an ebook that I wrote, it only contains a few of my basic techniques. Now, all of these techniques can be used all the way through all the stages of dementia, but I also teach advanced courses on how to manage people in advanced stages of Alzheimer's. If a family really wants to keep their loved one at home and as independent as possible, then I'd recommend they take the advanced courses too. Because it's not a slam dunk that as somebody advances, they have to be put in a nursing home or in a retirement center or in a memory unit. Mm-hmm. I plan to be able to keep my husband home until his final days. Mm-hmm. And I think I can with the techniques that I have.
So, we have listeners on the show all over the country. I mean, do your seminars that you're talking about reach out to people everywhere, or is it more for people in your particular area?
Well, that's a very good question, because people can call me, and we do coaching and we do programs over the telephone. But next year, Frank, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating video home study courses.
That's great.
And at the point where those video home courses are available, of course, we can ship them out all over the United States, or they will be available electronically on our website.
Okay. And why don't you tell everybody how they can get to your website?
Well, right now, they can get to a page where they can contact me. That is www.inspiredcaregivers, that's with an S, .com. Now, starting in about 3 weeks, because we're in beta, we will have a full website out there available for them with much more information.
Great, but at least they could get to you, send you an email, or contact you in some way. And I know I'm looking at it right now, and if you put your email address in there, you can get a free article too. It's called "Go from Baffled and Bewildered to Confident Caregiving in 6 Simple Steps." So that's great, So there's so go to that website, inspiredcaregivers.com. Okay. So we've got a few minutes left, but for those listening that are confronted with this type of situation, or could be confronted with a loved one in the future. A lot of people don't realize all of a sudden one day, boy, you're confronted with it. I mean, what words of wisdom do you have for them in dealing with it, in dealing with this?
I think the single biggest comment that I can make, the most important comment, Frank, is that they should line up 2 or 3 people that they can depend on that will help them when needed with their loved ones. Now, this could be family, it could be friends, it could be volunteers from a church, because to begin with, it doesn't seem like very much of a chore or of an overwhelming task. But the longer a caregiver does it, the more of a toll it takes. And caregivers have to have respite. They have to be able to have some time off. If they have already lined up people who can help them, then that's so huge. Caregivers can learn the other things they need to know about taking care of their loved ones. They can bring in occupational therapists and physical therapists and speech therapists. They can come to my course. But the thing that a lot of caregivers don't think about is how to take care of themselves.
Right. That's number one, because as you probably know, it's written all over that Sometimes it's quite often that the actual patient, if you will, or loved one outlives the caregiver because of the stress and things. So I think that's so important. They have to take care of themselves.
AP, which is Associated Press, had an article that said 60% of family caregivers die before their charges.
All right. Yeah.
It is not easy to do, and it gets harder the longer a person does it. They just have to learn how to take care of themselves. As a matter of fact, I'm writing an article right now for Concordia University, their Department on Aging, that just talks a little bit about how difficult it is over the long term to take care of loved ones.
Yeah. Well, Pamela Spahr, thank you so much for joining us. Just a wealth of information. Go to her website at inspiredcaregivers.com. Check out her Caregiver Survival Toolkit. Just go to Amazon, get information there, and thank you so much. And I know you're fighting a cold, so I appreciate you toughing it out with us. And best of luck to you. And let us know. We'd love to have you back when you come out with the hard copy. That'd be great.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show, Frank. It's just been a pleasure.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you all for listening. Thanks for all your support, and keep your wonderful comments and suggestions coming in. So appreciate that. Thanks for joining us on the Aging Boomers. Be safe out there, and we'll talk to you all soon.